Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, with COVID-era emergency benefits being reduced or cut altogether, a lot more families are struggling to make ends meet, and donations to local nonprofits to help support those families in need could use a big boost. So tonight, we have three women who work in the front lines of serving financially strapped individuals and families to hear about the challenges and how you, as our viewers, can help. First, we'd like to hear from you to help drive the conversation here on the show. You can do that in a variety of ways via social media on Facebook and Twitter. You can email us, or you can dial into our follow-up hotline to voice your opinion or suggest future show topics. And if you'd like to watch any of our past shows this season, just log on to deltapublicmedia.org. In studio tonight, we have three special guests. As you can see, Audra Davis, President and CEO of the United Way of Saginaw County. Mary Ellen Johnson, she is the President and CEO of Youth Protection Council, Saginaw County. And last but not least, Jill Hogenson, she is the President and CEO of Child and Family Services of Saginaw County. Going to be a great discussion. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
As I said at the outset, you work on the front lines of serving people in need, all three of you. Opportunity tonight to talk about the people you serve, the challenges you're facing, your clients are facing in these current economic times, and how our viewers can help. So stay tuned and get your pens and pencils ready to write a few things down. Okay, here's where I'm going to start with. Inflation's at a 40-year high. COVID-era emergency benefits have been reduced or cut altogether. Talking about cuts to food assistance like SNAP, housing assistance, direct payments from the feds, and now Medicaid is asking folks to reapply for funding again, which got to go through some more hoops. There's a lot of stuff going on that's resulting in folks that are hurting. So, how has this made this tougher for all of you? And Audra, I'll start with you with United Way, for the families you serve, organizations that you serve.
Yeah, sure. You know, we know that 43% of Saginaw County residents live in what we call an ALICE threshold. That's an asset limited, income constrained, but employed. There are working folks that are unable to make ends meet. The one myth about ALICE is that these are folks that are maybe working entry-level jobs, or are not educated or lack skills, and that's not always the case. The one big myth about ALICE is that these folks could be college graduates and new graduates looking for employment. They could be long-term successful career employees that have been forced out of work, that are now re-entering the workforce. But they are really struggling. They're working multiple jobs many times, lacking the ability to make car repairs, pay utility bills, buy groceries, care for their kiddos. And this is really a big issue in our community. When we talk as a whole of 43% of our community, looking at that number, and as high in some of our rural and our urban areas as 60% of the population living in an asset limited but income constrained area of life. That really sends a message to us about we need to do better for our community. We need to do better for our people.
Right. So Mary Ellen, I'll go to you with the Youth Protection Council. Tell our viewers a little bit about the people you serve, the kind of services you're bringing, and kind of segue into what Audra said in terms of these tough economic times. How's it affected the folks that you're serving?
Just want to thank you for having me here, and what a great opportunity, and to be in the presence of my friends and colleagues that are working every day to keep children and families safe. We're grateful to be here. So we're the Youth Protection Council. We run shelter programs for runaway and homeless youth. We serve youth 12 to 17 in our emergency shelter, youth 17 to 21 in our longer term shelter program, and youth 17 to under 25 in our rental assistance program. COVID has made things much more difficult for our youth. Families have been struggling, and as a result of that, our kids are finding themselves out on the street. We have a young man that we were connected with through Michigan Works, living with grandparents, and they just told him, "You can't stay here." So this young guy is literally walking the streets trying to find places to stay, and hoping that his grandparents will let him in a couple times a week. So it's been, the pandemic has really stressed families. It's made vulnerable youth even more at risk, and the mental health crises have really compounded the trauma that our kids face. Our kids have complex trauma, and that just means that they've had a lot of trauma over a really long period of time, and homelessness is a huge trauma for our kids to face, and the pandemic has made it worse.
Let me expand on that a little, because everybody's dealing with sort of this mental health crisis, the stress, the anxiety. It was already sort of building before the pandemic, and even worse. So in all of your sort of organizations, are you doing anything differently in that space in terms of creating additional mental health support?
I'll talk
Okay.
to that for a second,
Okay.
Mike. Jill Hogenson from Child and Family Service,
Sure.
and thanks for having us as well. What we have seen is definitely an increase in the anxiety and the depression and all emotional health areas from our clients. And when you talk about that, it was building before, for sure, but I think COVID was this unimaginable thing that we all were in that in for a really long period of time. And in that period, there were people that maybe never really thought of themselves as having emotional health difficulties before, that all of a sudden were having emotional health difficulties. And so we have seen, our agency had never, up until March of 2022, had a wait list for services. And so currently in the area, we had to begin a wait list to give people some hope that, instead of picking up the phone and dialing for services and being told we are not taking any more patients, we were beginning wait lists. And that's what we've seen in the community. You have wait lists for counseling services for people spanning from maybe a couple weeks up to 8 months in some cases. And so the wait list issue has been a huge in terms of struggle for our agency in dealing with these enhanced mental health issues. So you've had people that have had mental health issues, and then COVID sort of took that to a different level, and then people that maybe never ever experienced difficulty with anxiety or depression before, and so we're trying to service them. We have, since January, had an unprecedented amount of calls at our agency, and that we are working very hard to try to service as best we can, not only in our counseling center, but our sexual assault center. And our sexual assault center is grant funded, and all those services are free to victims of sexual assault and their families. But right now, that wait list is so extensive that when people are finally ready to call for services as a victim, they can't get in. Mm-hmm. And so that weighs heavy on our hearts, on our clinicians' hearts that are very passionate about, helping people where they're at. And that's what our agency has tried to do over 150 years, actually. We have a history in this area. We started out as a shelter for women and children, actually back in 1870, and then we went to be an orphanage until about the mid-1960s, where we started counseling, and then have gone from there. So
that's quite a history. That's something to be proud of. So Audrey, with the United Way, these are really two good examples of two women working on the front lines of some hard work, representing some really good organizations, and yet you work with so many more. So tell us how you sort of work with organizations like this, and with others, and how you filter through all the needs that you have.
So a lot of people don't know that United Way is a fundraising agency first and foremost. That's really where we began as a community chest organization. We too have been operating over 100 years, serving the community at large through Saginaw County, and we began as that fundraising agency addressing the highest unmet needs in Saginaw County through community impact studies and unmet need assessments, community assessments. And so by community members, folks that might be receiving services, and other agencies, we would gather that information and discover what our highest community unmet needs were. In the beginning, we helped fund and expand both of our hospital services to increase bed capacity to serve our community when Community Chest was acting pre-United Way name, but same work. And then obviously transformed over the years to United Way. We fundraise through workplace campaigns and special events. And obviously, private donors can also contribute if they don't have access to a workplace campaign. But we always want to encourage donors to give, advocate, and volunteer. Give of obviously money if they can support the good work that's taking place by really tremendous agencies in our community. Give of their time and talents through volunteering, and give of their passions through advocacy for those that do not have a voice. And we can help connect them in all of those different ways to volunteer services, to being a voice for folks that do not have one, and obviously helping to connect them to give of money if that is what they wish to do.
Sure.
But you know, so often on the campaign trail, I'm asked, well, this is a great agency, or this is a great agency, or why aren't you funding this agency? And that hurts. It hurts very deeply for our organization, because we too care very deeply about the people that we're serving in our community and the good work that's taking place. But we only have so much money, and we need more money to help more agencies deliver the great work and services that we have. And it's heartbreaking to know that there's really great work that is needed and funding that's needed to help support those services, but the lack of opportunity to support that work because of the lack of funding that we receive. So we would really encourage anyone that has a passion to give to please do so that we can continue doing the really great work that we've been doing with the partnerships that we have through our impact funded partners.
And during the show, we'll have put a graphic up all your websites, so the viewers will see your website. It's a good place to find more information about your organization, the work you do, and also probably a donate button there. I'm sure they could probably also volunteer. Maybe we'll talk about that. So Mary Ellen, you've been at this work, told me 40 plus years.
Yes.
So how is maybe it different this day and age, these times, than you've ever seen before? Or is it sort of more the same?
I'll tell you that the work is more difficult for our team members. And so Jill and I had lunch today, and we were talking about what else can we do to support our team members. I do want to just talk for just a second. Shelters never close. And while some folks were working at home at their kitchen table, our team was in the shelter, and we never turned kids away. And they came to work afraid for that they would get ill, that their children would get ill, that their elderly parents might get ill. We had 0 call-off days. 0 call-off days. And so staff are incredibly dedicated, but the COVID era stressed staff out considerably, and the need to really support the team so that they are present and available and have energy left to support our kids is a really key part of how we address mental health issues.
And it's hard work, and it's awesome you recognize it. I think a staffing issue is another thing that's kind of bubbled up since the pandemic. Everybody's looking for staff. Staff is stressed. So how are you handling in that on your end with that?
Yeah, I would say, you know, there's this huge need for services, and there's a deficit in social workers. And so it's been difficult to, you know, we work very hard to maintain our staff, and but we've definitely felt that. We've had turnover. Staff, you know, have been able to gain opportunities that social workers have never been able to gain before, and they're able to move around, and we've felt that. And but yeah, our agency, one of the things I will say that is sort of a good thing that came out of COVID is that we were able to go as a counseling agency into the virtual world and the phone therapy world. It's something that was always needed in the past, but insurance companies didn't want to fund, you know, didn't want to pay for those sort of services. But COVID opened that up. So our staff was able to continue seeing their patients during that COVID time, and we continued to this day to offer phone therapy, virtual therapy, or the option of in-person therapy. But that ability that COVID brought about removed barriers for many people to get services, because those that maybe didn't have transportation or didn't have a child care for, to be able to go and get away and seek some counseling, or maybe just had some mobility issues, couldn't receive counseling, or scheduling issues for that matter. They can call up, they can talk to their therapist on the phone, on their lunch hour, and so there are some good things that have come about, and certainly as a staff that that transition to that virtual world allowed us to be able to be there for our patients and community. So,
Good stuff.
Yeah.
I like to dispel some myths and maybe some stigmas about the people you serve and the work that you do. So maybe let's just go there. Let's talk about homelessness and the Youth Protection Council. What are some myths and stigmas that the viewers maybe don't know about that we need to kind of dispel and maybe clear up?
That our kids are very bright and compassionate. They're not just troubled youth. They do have goals, and they're wonderful, wonderful people. I think folks sometimes see our kids on the street. They may have a hoodie over their head, and they assume that these are bad kids. They're bad kids. They do bad things. They're bad for our community, but they are wonderful children. They're just looking for some love and care and support because they don't have that from home. So my biggest thing would be, when you see our kids on the street, they may have a hood over their head, but they're wonderful people.
Okay. How about in the world you work, the child and family world? It's hard work. So what are some myths and stigmas that you need to clear up and people need to know about?
Yeah, I think, and in another positive note, coming out of COVID, one of the things that we have benefited by is there's been an increased awareness about an increased acceptance that mental health really is. It's real, it's part of our health, and it's okay to seek help. And our younger generation are growing up on, they're being exposed to, and it's being talked about mental health in a way that was never the case, as I was growing up, for sure. So we're seeing people that maybe never would darken the doors of a mental health agency before, now being willing, because of that increased awareness and increased acceptance, and really reality that they're experiencing some of these things that they may have not thought that they would ever face in their lives before. So it's a good thing. We have this greater awareness. We have more people being able to access our services. The problem is that the need is greater than what we're able
Sure.
to fulfill. And there's plenty of work to go around. You would hear that same story from any counseling agency in the area, that the demand is high. And so between staffing and just being able to get people through the door, we're struggling. We're doing the best we can to meet that need.
I don't know if you can expand on that. You're hard working,
Yeah.
working on the front lines on this work.
Yeah, I mean, I identify with both of the work that Mary Ellen's group at Youth Protection Council and Jill's group at Child and Family are both doing relative to capacity and needs and dispelling myths. I think the COVID experience and then the flood that impacted the community and the region, when they were talking about, COVID exposed the workforce to basically never resting and being fearful of impacting their own family's health. I see that in so many social service agencies that continue to be frontline service providers. Our own team, very small group of people, we went right from direct service and rental assistance to maintaining that very heavy load to providing support to the community relative to flood relief and maintaining distribution centers and answering an emergency call to support the community. And the capacity to care is there, in our community, but the people that we need to help support that work it's lacking in across the fields for skilled work. And then the funding to deliver that work is lacking, you
Sure.
know, because the workforce is changing. Work from home, work where you want to live. You know, folks that used to live and work in our community are now able to live and work in other states but maintain employment based in Saginaw, Michigan. And so we're seeing donors change their focus from, you know, a Saginaw, Michigan giving platform to somewhere out of state, because that's where they're residing now. And we understand that change. We're glad they continue to give, but we know that there are donors out there that have available capacity to give, volunteer, and support the work. And we really want to encourage them to reach out and get involved and become aware of what's taking place in the community to dispel the myth and to grow and increase and help our capacity.
So that's a very good point, and maybe you can elaborate on that as well when it comes to this donor database, because you and I talked about this week the way the workforce has changed and the pandemic created these issues. Some of your bigger, let's say, corporate donors that you work with their teams and their workforce, whether it's healthcare, automotive, colleges, their capacity to give has declined. So how do you have conversations to still try to, you know, feed the money, but their workforce has been depleted a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've become very creative in the way that we're engaging the workplace. We're talking about the value of philanthropy, how that helps build employee engagement and capacity, how corporations and companies, even small companies, that help to support a volunteer platform and a giving platform, see more fulfilled staff that maintains longevity with their company. They take pride in their work. They're more fulfilled as individuals. So we're really trying to build on that platform when we engage our donors and our partners in campaign work, is really helping to educate what are the challenges that you are experiencing as an employer. How can United Way help? How can the agencies that we work with help? And we realize that we're in it together, you know, to help lift each other. And certainly many of the folks that maybe are part of a workplace campaign, they may not realize it, but their folks may actually have family members that are homeless and are youth and need shelter. They may have folks in their family seeking mental health support and receiving counseling benefits from a United Way funded program or another agency in our community. And so we really want to help increase that awareness. What are you experiencing as an employer? What are the ways that we can help in that engagement piece to help lift your staff? What are the services that we know are available to your employee base, and how can we help continue to work together to create a thriving community? Because we know we're in it together.
Right.
And so it's so important to embrace one another through these challenging times.
So what are some things, both of you, that you've had to cut back on, things you've had to do without, services that people aren't getting as a result of maybe funding? What other things could you do with some additional funding, whether it's hiring additional people or serving a lot more people? So Jill, let me ask you that. So what are some things that you've had to live without? What have you cut back on? And how tough are those calls to make in those areas?
Yeah, you know, in terms of what we've had to live without, one of the things that Mary Ellen and I were talking about the other day is when you're in the nonprofit world, for sure, we wear, all of us wear a lot of different hats. And so we don't have some of the positions that maybe would support us in ways that we need to be supported. And our staff is layered upon layered with responsibility. And so, you know, in terms of what we go without, we look to volunteers sometimes. We look to our board, who are volunteers for us, to help us in areas, consult with us in areas. IT, for instance, that's a huge issue at our agency. We have, you know, technological issues, and we have to deal with them, and none of us are IT individuals. So not being able to hire maybe something that would really needed and would be, you know, of help to all of us. I think that's where we're at. as far as what we've had to cut back on, we talked a little bit earlier, Audra, United Way was not able to fund our counseling center this year. And so we've had to look and be creative, and we've had to look to other sources. And we were able to recently be awarded from the county some ARPA money, and that's going to help with that HOPE funding for sure. And we have had generous donors from the area that have out of the blue given to us. And so I don't think, when you and I talked the other day, I don't think sometimes the donors even realize what an impact they make on not just the work that we do, but the staff of our organization. Because when we know that the community supports what we do and that they're acknowledge that our service is needed, like, that's such an encouragement to our staff.
Sure.
And it makes us feel like, we know that we can't help everyone without support. And so anyways, it's a daily struggle with how to be creative and who can do what, and
Sure.
how we can pinch hit this problem or that problem
Right.
or this person leaving, and so how are we going to handle those things?
Sure. So Marilyn, we got about a minute and a half left, so I'll let you kind of have the last word on what your needs are and what you've had to go without and what you need more of.
In the nonprofit world, just as Jill said, and Audra knows as well, we just layer more jobs on top of staff. And so we don't have as many social workers to work with our kids in our rental assistance program as what we would like. Staff pick up, IT is a great example. So we have staff that are office managers that are now you get to be the IT person. So it's a lot of what's often referred to as those back room functions that get layered on top of people who went into the field to help and support vulnerable kids that are now taking on a lot of additional jobs, and that just results in less time with kids, and it stresses staff out. If I can take just one quick second, I just would like your viewers to know that 50% of those who are homeless regionally and nationally are children. And homelessness is extremely traumatic for children. And so I thank you for getting that last second in.
Sure.
That's the one piece I would love for folks to really think about when they're looking at their givable dollars.
And your websites are right there, UnitedWaySaginaw.org, the YPCCares.org, the ChildandFamilySaginaw.org. Pick up the phone, Google those websites. I'm sure they have a donate button there, and support them. They need the help, and we appreciate the work you do. And thanks for bringing these ladies in. You guys did a great job.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much for having us.
Thank you, Meg.
And that's our show for tonight, but be sure to join us again next Tuesday night for the follow-up. It's all about energy, from e-vehicles to the power grid to phasing out coal. Should be a lively discussion next week. That's Tuesday night at 8. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week and a great night. Thanks again.